Hello and welcome to the Kearney Math Show. Thank you all for tuning in today. On today's episode of the Kearney Math Show, we are going to be featuring multiplication and division with integers. So just like you heard in the song, product, quotient, sign, same rules apply. So before we get started, go ahead and take a moment to write your name, escribe tu nombre, on your paper, and go ahead and write entry. This is going to be entry number 8. So this is entry number 8. And before we get started, take a moment to read your learning goals. That's right. Go ahead and read those learning goals. All right, so by the end of today, guys, I want you to be able to look at any problem multiplying and dividing with both positive and negative numbers and be able to determine the sign of your answer and overall what your answer would be. But before we get started, let me just remind you of my expectations. As I'm going through the video, everything Ms. Kearney writes down, you also need to be writing down on your paper. And it is super important that as you go through, you watch the entire video until the end so that when you come to the station to practice, we can see that you really have gotten the full video and you understand. Okay, so we're going to be talking about multiplying and dividing. And up until this point, you guys have been multiplying since you were like in 3rd grade. And you've been multiplying all positive numbers. So you've been multiplying a positive times a positive. So this year, the big difference going into 7th grade is now we're looking at multiplying some negative numbers. So as we do this, I'm going to show you kind of some ways that I find the answer. Okay, so the first thing is if we're looking at multiplying a positive times a positive, for example, if we have 2 times 3, or that means 2 groups of 3, that means we can, multiplication is the same thing as repeated addition. So if we have 2 groups of 3, that means we're going to add 3 plus 3, which is 6. So a positive times, that little right here means times, a positive is a positive. So a positive times a positive is a positive. Nothing has changed. You guys already knew that. Okay? But then when we get to some other ones like a positive times a negative, for example, 2 times negative 3, instead of saying times, we can use the word groups of. So what that is that's 2 groups of negative 3. So that basically means we have negative 3 and another group of negative 3, and we're adding them together. And we know how to do that because they're both negative, and we know same signs, add. So since it's negative and negative, negative 3 plus negative 3 is negative 6. So a positive times a negative or a negative times a positive is negative. Okay? So right now we've learned a positive times a positive is positive. A positive times a negative is negative. Okay, and I'm going to show you an easy way to remember this in just a few minutes. Okay, and then the next thing, this is where it gets kind of complicated. If we have a negative times a negative, okay, typically instead of saying times, we're saying groups of. So we would say negative 2 times negative 3 should mean negative 2 groups of negative 3. But we can't have negative groups, can we? We can have negative numbers in the groups. We can't have a negative number of groups. So how Ms. Kearney looks at this is I look here and I see a pattern. Okay, I look at these numbers and I know how to solve some of these. For example, I can look up here and I can say 2, right here, 2 times negative 3. We already said we're just going to multiply 2 times 3. And we said a positive times a negative is a negative, so negative 6. Okay, 1 times a negative 3. Nothing's changed. We're still multiplying 1 times 3. And a positive times a negative, we said was a negative, so we get negative 3. And then we know 0 times negative 3, well, we know that's going to be 0. So I want you to see if there's a pattern. What are you doing as we're keeping negative 3 in all the problems here, okay? And then we're increasing what we're multiplying, or we're changing what we're multiplying it by. So if you look at the pattern, what are you doing to get from -6 to -3? How is that changing? How's your answer changing? That's right, it's getting less negative. It's going towards 0, so that means it's increasing by 3. Okay, so then if we go to the next one, how are you getting from -3 to 0? You're increasing by 3. So if we continue this pattern down to the next thing, what do you think I'm going to increase by? 3. So then that helps me find my answer. -1 times -3 is actually 0 plus 3 is 3. Okay, if I go to the next one, if I increase by 3 again, that means -2 times -3 would be +6. And the last one, -3 times -3 is 9. Okay, so we can't really say a negative number of groups, but I can look at a pattern and see that every time I'm multiplying that negative times a negative, I'm getting a positive. Okay, so anytime you have a negative times a negative, it is a negative. All right, so you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, how in the world am I going to remember this stuff? How am I going to remember if my answer is positive or negative? So I'm going to tell you a story. Several years ago, like probably 64 years ago when I was teaching and tutoring a little boy in 7th grade. And he was solving these problems with multiplication division and how to multiply positive and negative numbers. And he had this interesting little triangle trick that he did. And he would multiply and he'd point at this triangle and I would say a negative times a negative and he would just know it was a positive after he pointed at the triangle. Or I'd say a negative times a positive and he'd point and he'd know it was a negative. So I was like, what? Finally, I just kept looking and squinting. I'm like, what in the world are you doing? And I said, what? How do you always know the correct answer? And he said, well, let me show you the trick. And so he showed me the trick, and now I'm going to share the trick with you. And so, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, if you are worried about how to multiply, have no fear. Integer man is here. So let me tell you about Integer man. He's going to help you know how to multiply and divide. He actually was sick on the day they learned how to add and subtract, so he only works on multiplication division problems. So, Integer man, he just has a round face, and he's really tired because he's been doing way too much math. So his eyes look like they're almost closed. His eyes are actually negatives. Okay? And goodness gracious, you know what? He can smell math from a mile away. So his nose is a positive. Okay? And he wears this cape that says, Integer man. And it has a multiplication sign and division sign because he only knows how to multiply and divide. Okay? So how this works, and guys, either Ms. Kearney or Ms. Maney will show you how to use Integer man. Okay? So if it doesn't make sense right now, I promise you, we'll show you and you're going to love him. Okay? So how it works is if you're doing a problem, say you have -3 times -5. What you do is you point at the sign of the two numbers you're multiplying. So if I have -3, I'm going to point right here to this negative, and I'm multiplying it back times -5. So I'm going to point to this other one. You don't have to draw a circle. I'm just drawing a circle to show you what I'm pointing at. And then you're going to look and you're going to say, what do I have left over? If you look down, I have it circled the plus sign. So my answer is positive. 3 times 5 is 15. Okay? Let me show you another one. Okay, if I have positive 2 times -7. I know 2 times 7 is 14, but I need to figure out my sign. So I'm going to point to my positive 2 times -14, and I'm going to say, what do I have left over? I have a negative, so my answer is going to be -14. Okay? And like I said, we will show you more of these when you come to the practice station. Okay? Now, good news. I said the Integer man knows how to multiply and divide. So have no fear. Integer man is here. So you're going to use down here where it says division. You're going to use Integer man for division as well. Integer man. Remember, he only knows how to multiply and divide. So when we say a positive divided by a positive, well, that's the same thing we've always been doing. A positive divided by a positive is going to be a positive. Okay, but then when we get to a positive divided by negative, okay, so we're going to say a positive divided by a negative. What do you have left out? It's not circled as a negative. Okay, other way around, if you do a negative divided by a positive, you're going to circle a negative divided by a positive, and what do you have left over? That negative sign, so it's a negative. And now the last one, a negative divided by negative. So we're going to circle a negative divided by a negative, and what do we have left over? A positive. Okay? So we can say, just as an example, we can say negative 18 divided by positive 6. You're still going to divide 18 divided by 6 and get 3. But then a negative divided by a positive using integer man. Sorry, integer man's looking a little crooked. Negative divided by a positive, what do you have left over? Is a negative. So my answer is going to be negative 3. Okay? So, as I was saying, you right now may be a little confused by integer man, but I promise you we're going to show them to you and we're going to help it make sense, and you're going to find the integer man is amazing and helps you with all of your multiplication division problems. Okay? So, as of right now, if you're finished with the notes, you can go back and write down any questions you have and rewatch the notes if you need to. And if not, then you can go ahead and write one thing you learned and one question you have and start on the practice on the back. And we will be with you momentarily. Thank you for tuning in. We hope to see you on the next episode. Make me proud, guys. Peace out, Rainbow Trout. Love you, mean it.